We've got nitrogen in the system to 200 psi. We're using a high pressure gauge on the AC machine. Let's use the pointer here. We want to make sure that the pointer's on the higher side of the gauge. What that'll do is it'll allow us to see while we soap and water, if this needle drops, we've got a leak in the system. So we're going to take some soap and water solution. We're going to start at the compressor and we're going to soap and water all the fittings and lines, the condenser and evaporator, back to the compressor. That usually takes about 5 minutes, and if this is dropped during that period, then we're pretty good. We have a pretty good idea that we have a leak in the system. So we're going to go in soap and water, and we'll check back once we've finished the soap and water. So we've soap and watered the system. If there was a leak, we'd see bubbles around the leak area. We'd make a repair to it, and then we would retest it this way. The gauge is held. There's indicating there's no leak. So now what we're going to do is we're going to release the nitrogen into the atmosphere. We don't want to recover it into the machine. It'll contaminate the refrigerant in there. How we do that's really simple. We just come back to our nitrogen bottle. We shut off the main tank. We loosen off our connection at the regulator. And then we'll open up the manifold gauge set, not all the way, but just enough so that we can let the nitrogen out. We don't want to do it too fast that oil's carried with it. We want to leave the oil in the system. You'll know if it's coming out too quickly because there'll be misting of oil, or you'll see the oil coming out with the nitrogen. We definitely don't want to do that. So we just crack it open enough that it'll allow the nitrogen to go back in the atmosphere. After all, our atmosphere contains approximately 78% nitrogen, so there's absolutely no harm in doing this. But there would be harm if you tried to recover it into the machine because it'll contaminate the refrigerant R134A. Thing worked out well, it held 200 psi, no bubbles during the soap and water test. You could also use a black light and dye system in there as well to check for leaks. You have to add the dye to the refrigerant oil. Many of the manufacturers are doing that. Nevertheless, we've proven that the system will hold refrigerant or pressure up to 200 psi, which is satisfactory for our leak testing. What we're going to do now is we have to vacuum the system. The reason that we vacuum the system is to remove any moisture. Any moisture, even a drop of moisture in the system, can freeze up in the expansion valve and cause problems with the system functioning. So by vacuuming it down to about 29 inches, 30 inches of mercury, we boil out any moisture in there. So to vacuum, it's very simple. Again, if you're stuck on using the machine, just simply refer to the manual, table of contents, and go to vacuuming. Quite simply, you just hit the vacuum button. You have a choice in time. The standard procedure for vacuuming now is 15 minutes. If it has been open for any length of time and you've done repairs or it's very humid out, you can vacuum for longer. You can vacuum for 30 minutes. You just simply change it using the number pad here to 30 minutes. 15 is the standard time. It's going to ask us next, do we want a leak check? Yes. We've pressure tested the system to 200 psi. Now we can double check that it's not leaking while it's in a vacuum. What happens is during the, at the end of the vacuuming process on this machine, it goes into a 10-minute leak test. So it holds the vacuum for 10 minutes. If it doesn't rise, then we know that we've got a tight system, and then we can go ahead and charge it. If the gauges do rise, then we know that we have a leak in the system. We're going to have to repressure test it and find the leak and make the repairs. So we just simply hit yes. We want to leak test it. It equalizes the pressure, and then you'll hear the machine start up. The vacuum pump will come on, as well as the filtration system. Anything that we've recovered in the tank from earlier on will be sent through a filter, and it'll be recycled during the vacuuming process. We can set on the gauges, we can set the small pointer arrow on the back side of the gauge, so as it draws it down into a vacuum. We also have a visual reference here showing that that it's pulled it down. It'll mark the lowest point it goes. That way, during the leak test, we can also have a visual inspection to see if this rises up at all. So once the vacuuming process is done, we'll come back and show you how to add oil.